The corner office felt smaller than usual as I faced Bradley Hutchinson across his mahogany desk. 6 years of my life spread between us in blueprints and broken promises. His question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "That's your final decision?" No anger in his voice, just cold calculation. I looked at the man who had built his empire on my designs, my late nights, my passion for creating spaces where families could thrive. "You really couldn't stand seeing who actually built this place, could you?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. His face went pale. I stood slowly, closed my laptop with deliberate precision, and spoke quietly but clearly. "Then let's see how it stands without its foundation." Walking out of Meridian Development Group felt like leaving a piece of my soul behind, but the betrayal burning in my chest gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. 6 years earlier, I had walked through those same glass doors as Alaska Rivers, fresh out of USC with a master's degree in sustainable architecture and stars in my eyes. Bradley Hutchinson had seemed like a visionary then, talking about revolutionizing residential development with environmentally conscious design. My first project changed everything. Green Haven was supposed to be a simple, affordable housing complex, but I saw potential for something extraordinary. I designed buildings that breathed with their environment, using solar collection systems I had studied in graduate school, rainwater harvesting integrated into the landscape, and natural ventilation that reduced energy costs by 60%. The complex won 3 national awards that first year, including the prestigious Environmental Design Excellence Award. I remembered the ceremony in Chicago, standing on stage as they announced Green Haven as the most innovative residential project in the country. Bradley had been there, applauding from the audience, genuinely proud of what we had accomplished together. Or so I thought. The second project came naturally. Sunset Ridge was my chance to refine the living building concept, structures that actually improved their environmental impact over time. I spent months researching bio-integrated materials, consulting with environmental engineers, designing systems where the buildings would generate more energy than they consumed. The project exceeded every sustainability metric we set. Jenny Walsh from marketing became my closest friend during those early years. She understood my vision, helped translate complex environmental benefits into language that resonated with buyers. We would sit in her office until 9 at night, discussing how to present solar efficiency ratings and carbon footprint reductions in ways that made families excited about their future homes. Trevor Martinez, our senior engineer, became my technical partner. He could take my wildest architectural dreams and find ways to make them structurally sound and cost-effective. When I designed a residential building with integrated living walls, Trevor figured out the irrigation and structural support systems. When I wanted to incorporate geothermal heating, Trevor made the numbers work. But something started shifting during my 3rd year. Bradley began sitting in on client presentations, initially just observing. Then he started contributing insights that sounded remarkably similar to conversations we had shared privately. I noticed him using phrases I had coined, like calling our developments tomorrow's neighborhoods, available today. The pattern became more obvious during the Willowbrook project. I had spent weeks developing what I called adaptive architecture, buildings designed to change with families as they grew. Modular interior systems, expandable living spaces, flexible room configurations. During the presentation to investors, Bradley introduced the concept as something we had developed collaboratively, but by the end of his speech, every innovative element was being described as his breakthrough thinking. I convinced myself it was just enthusiasm, that Bradley was so excited about our work that he was getting carried away. The projects kept winning awards. Our waiting list for custom homes stretched 18 months. I focused on pushing the boundaries of what sustainable architecture could accomplish. The revelation came accidentally, as these things often do. I was leaving late one evening when I heard Bradley on a phone call in his office. The door was slightly open, and his voice carried clearly into the hallway. He was talking to someone about the upcoming board meeting, describing his revolutionary green building philosophy to what sounded like potential investors. Every word he spoke was mine. The environmental impact calculations I had spent months developing, the cost-benefit analysis of sustainable materials I had presented to him just the week before, the vision for communities that actually improved their ecosystems over time. He was presenting 6 years of my research, my innovation, my sleepless nights, as his own genius. I stood frozen in that hallway, listening to my life's work being stolen in real time. When he mentioned my latest concept for carbon-negative buildings, describing the precise methodology I had outlined in a confidential report just days earlier, I realized this wasn't enthusiasm or collaboration. This was systematic theft. The worst part wasn't just hearing my ideas claimed by someone else. It was the tone of ownership in Bradley's voice, the casual confidence with which he presented concepts that had cost me years of research and development. He spoke about my innovations like they were family heirlooms he had inherited, natural extensions of his own brilliance. That night, I drove home in a daze, trying to process what I had discovered. 6 years of my career, my reputation in sustainable architecture, the foundation of everything I had built professionally, was being systematically claimed by the man I had trusted most. The following weeks felt like living in a house of mirrors where nothing appeared as it truly was. I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored, noticing patterns that painted a disturbing picture of deliberate sabotage disguised as support. It began with the Riverside Towers project, my most ambitious design yet. I had created a mixed-use development with residential units, retail space, and office buildings, all integrated into a single sustainable ecosystem. The buildings were designed to share resources, with solar panels on the residential towers powering common areas, gray water from apartments irrigating landscaped retail courtyards, and geothermal systems serving the entire complex. 3 months into construction, I received a call from Diana Foster, the environmental compliance officer assigned to the project. There were problems with our LEED certification application. The materials list didn't match my specifications. The solar panel installation was incomplete. The gray water recycling system had been replaced with conventional plumbing. I drove to the construction site immediately, blueprints in hand, expecting to find contractor errors that could be quickly corrected. Instead, I discovered a systematic pattern of substitutions. Every sustainable element I had designed had been replaced with conventional alternatives. Where I had specified recycled steel, standard steel was being used. Where I had designed living walls with integrated air filtration, basic drywall had been installed. Where I had planned solar integration, empty mounting brackets created the illusion of renewable energy without any actual function. Carlos Rivera, the site foreman, looked uncomfortable when I questioned him about the changes. He had worked with me on 3 previous projects and knew my specifications better than most engineers. When I pressed him for answers, he reluctantly admitted that change orders had come directly from Bradley's office, overriding my architectural plans after initial approval. The cost implications were staggering. My sustainable designs typically had higher upfront costs, but generated significant savings over time through energy efficiency and environmental performance. The substituted materials created all the expense without any of the benefits. The project was running 40% over budget, and every cost overrun was being attributed to my impractical green building obsessions. I requested copies of all change orders and discovered a paper trail that painted me as an architect whose idealistic designs were financially irresponsible. Each substitution was documented with technical justifications that made my original specifications appear naive and wasteful. The documentation suggested that I had designed systems that were theoretically sound but practically impossible to implement cost-effectively. The pattern extended beyond Riverside Towers. I reviewed recent projects and found similar substitutions across multiple developments. The Harmony Heights project was supposed to feature passive solar heating that would reduce energy costs by 50%. Instead, Conventional HVAC systems had been installed, with documentation claiming my passive solar design was insufficient for climate conditions. The Brookside community development was designed with permeable parking surfaces and natural storm water management. Standard asphalt and concrete had been substituted, with reports citing drainage concerns that contradicted my engineering studies. Jenny Walsh confirmed my growing suspicions during a careful conversation in her office. She had been instructed to document performance issues with my recent projects. Budget overruns, timeline delays, client complaints about impractical features. She showed me the file Bradley had asked her to compile, a comprehensive record of what appeared to be systemic problems with my architectural judgment. But Jenny had also been keeping her own records. She showed me the original client satisfaction surveys, which were overwhelmingly positive. Families loved living in my sustainable developments. Energy bills were dramatically lower than comparable conventional homes. Air quality was measurably better. Property values in my developments were appreciating faster than traditional neighborhoods. The disconnect was jarring. Official documentation portrayed me as an architect whose green building obsessions created expensive failures, while actual residents experienced unprecedented quality of life and financial benefits from sustainable design. Trevor Martinez provided the final piece of the puzzle. As senior engineer, he had access to structural and systems documentation for all projects. He showed me correspondence between Bradley's office and contractors, explicitly instructing them to implement cheaper alternatives to my specifications, while maintaining the appearance of sustainable construction. The substitutions weren't just about saving money. They were strategically designed to create failures that could be blamed on sustainable architecture principles. When energy performance didn't meet projections, the fault lay with my aggressive efficiency targets. When construction costs exceeded budgets, the blame fell on my insistence on expensive green materials. When timeline delays occurred, they resulted from my complicated environmental systems. I realized that Bradley wasn't just stealing credit for my innovations. He was systematically sabotaging my current work to justify replacing me while simultaneously preparing to launch future projects using designs he would claim as his own. Every failure was being carefully documented to build a case for my incompetence, while every success was being rebranded as evidence of his visionary leadership. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. For months, possibly years, I had been working within a structure designed to undermine my professional credibility while harvesting my intellectual property for Bradley's benefit. Discovery has a way of accelerating once you start looking in the right places. Within days of uncovering the systematic sabotage, I stumbled upon something that made the theft of credit and deliberate project failures seem like minor infractions in comparison to what Bradley was actually planning. I found the files by accident while researching sustainable material suppliers on the company server. A folder labeled Future Development Initiatives contained documents I had never seen before, despite being the senior architect responsible for all innovative projects. The folder required Bradley's access codes, but a server glitch had left it temporarily available to senior staff. The first document made my heart stop. It was my eco-community design, the project I had been developing privately for 2 years as the ultimate expression of sustainable residential development. The design integrated renewable energy, closed-loop water systems, food production, and waste management into a completely self-sufficient residential community. It represented everything I had learned about sustainable architecture, refined into a single comprehensive vision. Bradley had already pitched the project to the City Planning Committee as his own innovation. The presentation materials used my exact drawings, my cost projections, my environmental impact studies, even my specific language describing neighborhoods that heal the earth while nurturing families. The project was valued at $50 million and would establish Meridian as the undisputed leader in sustainable development. But the theft of my masterpiece design wasn't even the most shocking discovery. Personnel files revealed Bradley's plan to replace me with his nephew, Kevin Hutchinson, who had graduated from a second-tier architecture program 6 months earlier with barely passing grades. Kevin's transcript showed struggles with basic structural engineering and failing grades in environmental design courses. The timeline was already in motion. Kevin was scheduled to start as associate principal architect the following month, with a salary equal to what I had earned after 6 years of building the company's reputation. The official story would be that Kevin was bringing fresh perspectives to sustainable design, while I was being reassigned to focus on research and development, a position that existed nowhere in the company structure. Email correspondence revealed the true scope of Bradley's planning. He had been negotiating with Pinnacle Developments, Meridian's primary competitor, to sell them modified versions of my archived designs. Projects that I had created for Meridian would be rebuilt by our competitors, with Bradley receiving consulting fees for providing innovative green building expertise. The financial projections were staggering. Bradley stood to earn millions from selling my intellectual property while simultaneously eliminating the person who could expose the theft. Kevin's role was to serve as a figurehead while Bradley ghost-authored all architectural decisions, maintaining control over sustainable design projects without the inconvenience of dealing with the actual innovator. I discovered emails between Bradley and Mayor Patricia Stone discussing the eco-community project timeline. The mayor was enthusiastic about the development, praising Bradley's vision for transforming municipal approaches to sustainable housing. Federal grants totaling $12 million were already being allocated based on environmental impact projections. I had calculated over hundreds of hours of detailed analysis. The cruelest irony was finding my own work described in Bradley's correspondence as examples of why the company needed new leadership in sustainable design. Projects where he had deliberately sabotaged my specifications were cited as evidence that green building approaches needed more business-minded oversight. Failures he had engineered were being used to justify replacing me with someone who lacked even basic competency in environmental architecture. Kevin Hutchinson's portfolio, attached to his hiring documentation, consisted entirely of academic projects with fundamental errors in sustainable design principles. His senior thesis proposed solar panel installations that would actually reduce building efficiency due to improper orientation. His understanding of water management systems was so flawed that his designs would create flooding problems rather than preventing them. Yet this was the person Bradley planned to present as Meridian's new sustainable design expert, while simultaneously launching a $50 million project based entirely on my work. The documentation made it clear that Kevin's role was purely ceremonial. Bradley intended to maintain complete control over all design decisions while using his nephew as a credential shield. The most chilling discovery was a confidential memo outlining contingency plans if I discovered the arrangement before my planned departure. Bradley had prepared documentation suggesting that my recent project failures demonstrated declining professional judgment, possibly due to personal stress or substance abuse issues. Character assassination protocols were already prepared, designed to destroy my professional reputation if I attempted to expose the intellectual property theft. I realized that Bradley's plan was more sophisticated than simple plagiarism. He was engineering a complete transfer of sustainable architecture expertise from me to himself, using his nephew as a front while positioning me as a failed architect whose ideas had been unsuccessfully implemented. The eco-community project would become proof of his design genius, while I would be remembered as someone whose impractical idealism had been corrected by more experienced leadership. The scale of the deception suggested months, or possibly years of planning. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was a methodical campaign to harvest 6 years of my professional development while simultaneously destroying my ability to compete or expose the fraud. Armed with evidence of Bradley's comprehensive deception, I requested a private meeting to confront him directly. I spent the weekend organizing documentation, preparing for a conversation I hoped would result in honest acknowledgement and professional resolution. Despite everything I had discovered, some part of me still believed that direct confrontation might restore some semblance of integrity to our working relationship. I was naive beyond description. The meeting took place on Monday morning in Bradley's corner office, the same space where this story began. I laid out my evidence methodically, beginning with the systematic sabotage of my project specifications and progressing through the theft of my eco-community design. I presented email correspondence, change orders, financial projections, and timeline documentation. The case was comprehensive and undeniable. Bradley listened without interruption, occasionally nodding as if acknowledging points in an academic discussion. His calm demeanor was unsettling. I had expected defensiveness, anger, or at least surprise at being exposed. Instead, he seemed almost relieved, like a chess player whose strategy had progressed to its intended conclusion. When I finished presenting my evidence, Bradley opened his desk drawer and retrieved a thick folder I had never seen before. He spread its contents across the desk with deliberate precision, creating a counter-narrative that left me speechless. The documents appeared to show systematic financial irregularities connected to my projects. Inflated invoices from contractors, material cost overruns that generated apparent kickbacks, consulting fees paid to environmental firms that seemed excessive for services rendered. The paper trail suggested I had been embezzling project funds through elaborate schemes involving contractor collaboration and inflated sustainability upgrades. Every sustainable material I had specified came with premium pricing that appeared to benefit me personally through complex financial arrangements. Solar panel installations included consulting fees paid to companies where I was listed as a technical advisor. Water management system upgrades generated payments to environmental engineering firms that had apparently been paying me referral bonuses. Even the lead certification processes involved fees that seemed to flow back to me through circuitous consulting arrangements. The documentation was incredibly sophisticated, creating the appearance of systematic fraud spanning multiple years and dozens of projects. Financial records showed apparent personal income from sources related to every sustainable design element I had championed. The evidence suggested that my passion for green building had been motivated by personal financial gain rather than environmental conviction. Bradley explained that these irregularities had been discovered during routine financial auditing and that he had been hoping to resolve the situation privately to protect both my reputation and the company's standing with regulatory agencies. My confrontation had forced his hand, making it impossible to continue protecting me from consequences of what appeared to be extensive professional misconduct. The forged evidence was masterfully constructed, using actual project documentation as a foundation while adding falsified invoices, contracts, and financial transfers. Anyone reviewing the files without intimate knowledge of my actual work would conclude that I had been systematically defrauding the company while hiding behind environmental idealism. Bradley presented two options. I could resign immediately with a prepared statement, acknowledging design failures and professional misconduct, along with signing a comprehensive, non-compete agreement that would prevent me from practicing architecture in sustainable development for 5 years. The resignation would be characterized as voluntary departure due to personal stress, with no criminal charges filed despite apparent financial irregularities. Alternatively, Bradley would report the financial evidence to state licensing authorities and potentially law enforcement agencies. My architectural license would be suspended pending investigation. Criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud would likely follow. Even if ultimately exonerated, the investigation process would destroy my professional reputation and make future employment in architecture impossible. The non-compete agreement was particularly vicious, extending beyond direct employment to include consulting, teaching, writing, or any other professional activity related to sustainable design. It would effectively end my career in the field I had devoted my life to developing. I realized that Bradley's planning extended far beyond intellectual property theft. He had been systematically creating documentation to destroy my professional life completely, ensuring that I could never expose his fraud or compete with him professionally. The forged financial evidence was insurance against any attempt I might make to reveal his theft of my designs. The sophistication of the frame-up suggested involvement from Harold Winters, the company's senior accountant, who would have access to financial systems necessary to create convincing fraudulent documentation. The conspiracy included multiple employees and had been developing parallel to the intellectual property theft, creating multiple layers of protection for Bradley's criminal enterprise. As I sat in that office, looking at evidence of my apparent crimes that I knew to be completely fabricated, I understood that Bradley's plan was perfect in its comprehensive destruction. He would steal my life's work, destroy my professional reputation, and eliminate any possibility of future competition or exposure. The meeting ended with Bradley's calm question about my final decision. I realized that any response I gave within his framework would result in either voluntary destruction of my career or involuntary destruction through criminal prosecution. He had engineered a situation where I had no viable options for resistance or justice. That's when I understood that playing by his rules would only guarantee my defeat. The question wasn't whether I could prove my innocence within the system he had corrupted. The question was whether I could find a way to expose the entire system before it destroyed me. Walking away from Bradley's ultimatum felt like stepping off a cliff, but sometimes falling is the only way to discover you have wings. That afternoon, sitting in my apartment surrounded by 6 years of architectural drawings and professional documentation, I realized that my obsessive attention to detail had created something Bradley hadn't anticipated, an unbreachable record of truth. Every design I had ever created was documented in multiple formats: original sketches dated and signed, digital files with creation timestamps, email correspondence discussing development processes, photographs of construction phases. I had kept backup files on personal drives, cloud storage, and physical copies of critical documents. My habit of over-documentation, which colleagues sometimes joked about, had created an evidentiary fortress. But I wasn't alone in this fortress. The first call came from Susan Blackwood, a board member I had met only briefly during annual presentations. Her voice was carefully measured when she asked to meet privately, suggesting she had information that might interest me. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, away from any Meridian-associated locations. Susan arrived with a briefcase full of materials that transformed my understanding of the situation. For the past 8 months, she had been conducting a private investigation into Meridian's financial irregularities after receiving anonymous complaints about Bradley's management practices. The complaints had initially focused on budget overruns and timeline delays, but her investigation had uncovered a pattern of systematic fraud extending far beyond what I had discovered. Bradley's theft of my designs was just one component of a comprehensive embezzlement operation. He had been inflating project budgets, skimming profits through shell companies, and falsifying environmental compliance documentation to qualify for federal grants that funded his personal enrichment rather than actual sustainable construction. Susan showed me financial analysis revealing that projects attributed to my cost overruns were actually generating substantial profits through Bradley's fraudulent billing practices. The same substitutions that sabotaged my sustainable designs also created opportunities for kickbacks from suppliers who provided inferior materials at premium prices. The investigation had been triggered by inconsistencies between Meridian's reported environmental performance and actual construction practices. Buildings claiming LEED certification were failing environmental audits. Developments promoted as carbon neutral were generating massive environmental costs. The disconnect between marketing claims and actual performance had attracted attention from federal environmental agencies. Susan's most devastating revelation was that Bradley had been using my reputation to defraud government agencies. Grant applications for sustainable development projects included my credentials and past achievements as evidence of Meridian's expertise, while the actual construction violated every environmental standard I championed. My professional reputation was being weaponized to secure funding for environmentally destructive projects. Trevor Martinez, had been secretly documenting construction fraud for months. His engineering background allowed him to identify structural shortcuts and material substitutions that created genuine safety hazards. The documentation he had compiled included photographs of substandard foundation work, improper electrical installations, and ventilation systems that violated building codes. Trevor's evidence revealed that Bradley's fraud extended beyond financial theft to actual endangerment of residents. Buildings constructed with his substitute materials and modified specifications were structurally unsound. The Riverside Towers development, where my sustainable design had been systematically undermined, had foundation problems that could lead to partial collapse within 5 years. Jenny Walsh had been protecting me in ways I never realized. Every original project file, every initial design specification, every environmental impact study had been copied and stored in secure locations before Bradley could alter or destroy them. Her marketing background had taught her to maintain comprehensive documentation, and she had instinctively preserved evidence of my actual work while Bradley was fabricating evidence of my apparent failures. Jenny revealed that Bradley had instructed her to document my professional decline, but she had instead been recording his instructions, preserving evidence of his deliberate sabotage campaign. Her files included recordings of meetings where Bradley outlined plans to frame me for financial irregularities, while positioning himself as the injured party attempting to salvage projects damaged by my incompetence. The most shocking discovery was that Kevin Hutchinson, Bradley's nephew, was completely unaware of the fraud. He genuinely believed he had been hired based on merit and was excited about the opportunity to learn sustainable architecture from established experts. His academic struggles reflected honest effort rather than deliberate incompetence, and his enthusiasm for environmental design was sincere despite his limited knowledge. Carlos Rivera, the contractor who had implemented Bradley's sabotage instructions, was willing to testify about the systematic substitution of materials and modification of specifications. His documentation included original work orders, change instructions from Bradley's office, and photographs showing the differences between my designs and actual construction. Carlos revealed that other contractors had been questioning the modifications, recognizing that the changes compromised both environmental performance and structural integrity. Several had documented the discrepancies to protect themselves from potential liability when the structural problems became apparent. As we compiled evidence that evening in Susan's law office, I realized that Bradley's comprehensive plan had a fatal flaw. His systematic documentation of my apparent failures had created an equally systematic record of his actual crimes. Every forged invoice was time-stamped. Every falsified change order was logged. Every fraudulent grant application was filed with government agencies that maintained detailed records. The scope of evidence was overwhelming. Financial fraud, intellectual property theft, construction safety violations, environmental compliance fraud, and conspiracy to commit multiple felonies. Bradley's elaborate plan to destroy my career had generated a comprehensive record of his own criminal enterprise. But the most powerful weapon wasn't documentary evidence. It was the network of honest professionals who had been protecting truth while appearing to collaborate with Bradley's deception. Susan, Trevor, Jenny, and Carlos represented a shadow organization that had been documenting reality while Bradley was fabricating his alternative version. I understood that confronting Bradley directly had been exactly the wrong approach. The time for private resolution was long past. This was a federal crime requiring federal investigation, and we had enough evidence to ensure that justice would be comprehensive and unavoidable. The transition from victim to whistleblower required learning an entirely new vocabulary of federal law enforcement, regulatory compliance, and criminal investigation procedures. Susan Blackwood's legal background proved invaluable as we navigated the complex process of reporting comprehensive fraud to multiple agencies simultaneously. Our first step was contacting the Federal Bureau of Investigation's White-Collar Crime Division. The scope of evidence we had compiled indicated violations of multiple federal statutes: mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and violations of environmental protection laws. Agent Patricia Chen specialized in construction industry fraud and immediately recognized the significance of our documentation. The FBI investigation revealed that Bradley's operation was even more extensive than we had discovered independently. Federal agents had been monitoring suspicious grant applications from multiple development companies, including Meridian, as part of a broader investigation into construction industry fraud. Our evidence provided the missing pieces that connected individual irregularities into a comprehensive criminal enterprise. Harold Winters, the senior accountant who had helped create the fraudulent documentation used to frame me, became a cooperative witness within hours of federal contact. His confession revealed the full scope of Bradley's financial manipulation, including shell companies, falsified tax documents, and systematic theft from federal environmental programs. Harold's cooperation was motivated by genuine remorse and fear of extended prison time. He had initially believed he was helping Bradley manage legitimate tax optimization strategies, but gradually realized he was participating in extensive fraud. His detailed knowledge of financial systems allowed federal agents to trace money flows and identify previously unknown criminal activities. The construction safety violations proved to be the most serious criminal exposure. Inspector Tom Bradley, no relation to the CEO, had been accepting bribes to approve substandard construction that violated structural engineering standards. Buildings throughout the metropolitan area were potentially unsafe due to compromised materials and modified specifications that reduced load-bearing capacity. Federal agents coordinated with city building authorities to conduct emergency safety evaluations of compromised structures. The Riverside Towers development required immediate evacuation of 300 families due to foundation problems that created genuine collapse risk. The human cost of Bradley's fraud became starkly apparent as families were displaced from homes they had purchased, believing they were safe and environmentally sustainable. Diana Foster, the environmental compliance officer, had been documenting irregularities for months but lacked authority to initiate criminal investigation. Her cooperation with federal agents provided crucial evidence of systematic environmental fraud extending across multiple projects and involving false claims to regulatory agencies. The environmental fraud included claiming federal tax credits for renewable energy installations that were never completed, submitting false documentation for LEED certification processes, and misrepresenting projects' environmental impact to secure grants designed to promote sustainable development. Federal investigation revealed that Bradley's fraud network extended beyond Meridian to include several other development companies participating in similar schemes. My stolen designs had been sold to multiple firms, each claiming to have developed innovative, sustainable architecture independently. The total financial impact of the conspiracy approached $30 million in direct theft, with additional millions in environmental damage costs. The most disturbing revelation was that Bradley had been planning to expand the operation nationally. Documents seized from his office outlined strategies for franchising his fraud model to development companies in major metropolitan areas. My intellectual property was intended to be the foundation for a national network of companies claiming sustainable development expertise while actually constructing environmentally destructive and structurally unsafe buildings. Kevin Hutchinson's genuine dismay upon learning about his uncle's crimes provided some hope for redemption within the family. His cooperation with federal agents helped establish that his employment was part of the criminal conspiracy rather than legitimate hiring, but also demonstrated his complete innocence regarding the fraudulent activities. Kevin's architectural knowledge, while limited, was sufficient to recognize that his uncle's modified construction practices violated basic safety standards. His willingness to testify about conversations where Bradley had described shortcuts and cost-saving measures helped establish criminal intent and systematic planning. The federal investigation attracted attention from environmental protection agencies, state licensing boards, and congressional committees investigating fraud in federal grant programs. What had begun as my personal quest for justice became a comprehensive examination of corruption in sustainable development funding. Media coverage began focusing on the broader implications of the fraud beyond individual criminal charges. Environmental groups expressed outrage that federal programs designed to promote genuine sustainability had been hijacked to fund environmentally destructive projects disguised as green development. Families displaced from compromised buildings filed civil lawsuits seeking compensation for costs associated with emergency relocation and loss of property value. The class action litigation threatened to expose additional development companies participating in similar fraudulent practices. As the investigation progressed, I realized that Bradley's systematic theft of my intellectual property had inadvertently created evidence that would revolutionize federal oversight of sustainable development programs. The contrast between my actual designs and Bradley's fraudulent implementations demonstrated precisely what federal agencies should monitor to ensure legitimate environmental compliance. My role evolved from victim seeking personal justice to expert witness helping federal agencies develop improved oversight procedures for sustainable development grants. The technical knowledge I had developed over 6 years of innovation became invaluable for creating regulatory frameworks that would prevent similar fraud in the future. The scope of federal investigation ultimately encompassed 12 development companies, 47 individuals, and over 100 compromised building projects. What Bradley had intended as a localized fraud operation became the catalyst for comprehensive reform of federal environmental development programs. 6 months after walking out of Bradley's office, I stood in a federal courthouse watching him receive a 7-year prison sentence for conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. The judge's comments about endangering public safety and undermining environmental protection programs reflected the broader significance of his crimes beyond personal theft. Harold Winters received 3 years with eligibility for early release based on cooperation with ongoing investigations. Inspector Tom Bradley received 5 years and permanent banishment from any government position. The sentences reflected federal commitment to deterring construction industry corruption that threatened both public safety and environmental protection. The civil litigation resulted in $40 million in settlements for affected families and environmental remediation costs. Bradley's personal assets, including properties purchased with stolen funds, were liquidated to provide partial compensation for victims of his fraud. Kevin Hutchinson enrolled in continuing education courses to develop genuine expertise in sustainable architecture. His sincere commitment to learning environmental design principles earned him a position with my new firm as an apprentice architect, allowing him to rebuild the family reputation through honest work. The board of directors at Meridian offered me Bradley's former position as CEO, along with complete authority over company operations and a compensation package that exceeded his salary by 40%. The offer included stock options and profit-sharing arrangements that would have made me wealthy within 5 years. I declined their offer. Instead, I established Arctic Sustainable Design with Susan Blackwood as investor partner and Jenny Walsh as my first employee. Trevor Martinez joined as chief engineer, bringing both technical expertise and unwavering commitment to structural integrity. Carlos Rivera's construction company became our exclusive contractor, ensuring that every building would be constructed exactly as designed. Our first project was the eco-community development, funded directly by the city with federal grants totaling $15 million. The project proceeded exactly as I had originally envisioned, with renewable energy systems, closed-loop water management, integrated food production, and waste processing that actually improved environmental conditions. The construction process became a model for transparent, sustainable development. Every specification was documented, every material was verified, and every system was tested to exceed environmental performance standards. Federal monitors used the project as an example of how sustainable development grants should be implemented. Families began moving into the eco-community 18 months after groundbreaking, occupying homes that generated more energy than they consumed while providing healthier living conditions than conventional developments. Property values appreciated 20% during the first year, demonstrating that genuine, sustainable design created financial benefits alongside environmental improvements. The success of Arctic sustainable design exceeded my most optimistic projections. Within 2 years, we had completed 12 projects and employed 37 people, including several architects who had been inspired by our commitment to authentic environmental design. Our waiting list extended beyond 3 years, with clients willing to wait for buildings that delivered promised sustainability benefits. Federal agencies contracted with our firm to develop improved oversight procedures for sustainable development grants. My experience as both victim and expert witness provided unique insights into identifying fraudulent applications while promoting genuine innovation in environmental architecture. The broader impact of exposing Bradley's fraud extended far beyond individual justice. Congressional hearings resulted in enhanced oversight of federal environmental programs, stronger penalties for construction fraud, and improved coordination between regulatory agencies. Environmental protection became more robust because of comprehensive reforms triggered by our investigation. Jenny Walsh developed expertise in sustainable development marketing that helped other firms communicate environmental benefits accurately to potential clients. Her work contributed to industry-wide improvements in honest representation of green building capabilities. Trevor Martinez established engineering standards for sustainable construction that were adopted by state licensing boards and federal agencies. His protocols for verifying environmental system performance became required elements in federal grant applications for development projects. Carlos Rivera's construction company became a regional leader in authentic, sustainable building practices, training other contractors in proper implementation of environmental design elements. His commitment to precise specification adherence eliminated the cost overruns and performance failures that had characterized fraudulent projects. The network of honest professionals who had supported truth during Bradley's fraud became the foundation for an industry transformation toward authentic, sustainable development. Our collective experience demonstrated that environmental architecture could be profitable, reliable, and scalable when implemented with integrity. Most importantly, families throughout the region were living in homes that provided genuine environmental benefits, reduced living costs, and improved health outcomes. Children were growing up in neighborhoods that actually healed environmental damage while providing superior quality of life. The life lesson embedded in this journey became clear through daily experience rather than abstract reflection. True foundations are built through integrity, authentic expertise, and commitment to serving others rather than exploiting them. Those who attempt to succeed through theft and deception will ultimately collapse under the weight of their own corruption. But those who stand on solid ethical ground, who build their careers through honest service and genuine innovation, will rise higher than they ever imagined possible. The attempt to destroy my foundation had actually revealed its unshakable strength and attracted others who shared commitment to building something meaningful. Alaska Rivers, the young architect who had walked into Meridian 6 years earlier with stars in her eyes, had been transformed through betrayal into someone capable of creating authentic, sustainable communities that would benefit families for generations. The pain of discovery had been the catalyst for achieving everything I had originally dreamed of accomplishing. Bradley's attempt to steal my foundation had ultimately taught me that no one can take what you build with integrity, knowledge, and genuine care for others. Those qualities become stronger through testing, and victory achieved through honest effort provides satisfaction that stolen success can never match. As I stood in our latest community, watching children play in gardens that cleaned the air while providing fresh food for their families, I understood that justice isn't just about punishment for wrongdoing. Justice is about creating something better than what was destroyed, building futures that honor the principles that were attacked. The foundation Bradley tried to steal had not only survived his assault but had become the cornerstone for something far greater than what either of us had originally envisioned. Sometimes the greatest victories emerge from the deepest betrayals, when truth finally has the opportunity to build on solid ground. Have you ever experienced a situation where someone tried to take credit for your hard work or innovations? How did you handle it? And what would you do differently knowing what you know now? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others who might need to hear this message find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength through adversity and fighting back against workplace injustice. And please share this with anyone who's ever felt their contributions were undervalued or stolen, because sometimes we all need reminders that integrity and authentic expertise will ultimately triumph over deception and theft. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember that your true foundation can never be stolen by anyone who lacks the character to build their own.